Today is Tuesday, February 18th. This is Public Health and Safety. We do have a quorum with myself, council members Benton, Vice Chair Huffman, Kimbrough, Nash, Prep-T, and Taylor. So we will go ahead and get started. Before I do any legislation, I did want to go ahead and recognize our new Director of Health, Dr. Sammy Ariola from the Metro Health Department. Normally we would wait until the end to have our department updates, but since he is a guest and special with us today, wanted to go ahead and recognize him and share some comments, and hopefully we'll get a chance to have him come back in the future and kind of give a broader picture overview. But with that, I'll recognize Dr. Ariola.
Thank you, Chair Evans, and good afternoon, everyone. It's good to meet you. I know I was here sometimes in November to answer some of your questions, but it's my third week. But I'm not new to Nashville. I was with the department for about 18 years, from October 2002 until March of 2020, when I accepted the Director of Health position in Johnson County, Kansas. And after COVID, went to Prince George's County, Maryland, and then had the opportunity to come back here. And so working to improve and protect and sustain the health of Nashville residents, what I've been a part of now for about 18 years. Glad to be back to do it. And the approach for me is to engage all of you, is to engage the public. There's a reason we call it public health. And so you know the community, so I look forward to really working with you and other public entities, not-for-profit organizations, so that we can be more likely, more positioned to do what we want to do. And what we want to do is very easy, which is to create conditions in every part of our county where everyone who walks, lives, plays, visits Nashville has the opportunity to be as healthy as they possibly can. So you see me here, I'll be asking questions about what's going on in your community. We do want you to understand what our priorities are. Again, we have specific priorities that you probably have heard about. There's the issue of community violence. There are issues of addiction, drug overdose. There are issues of suicide. But again, when we move upstream, we find that there are common factors that we can work on to build resilience and ensure that residents have better opportunities to be as healthy as they can, and that's what we're going to be working on. It's very nice to meet all of you, and I look forward to engaging you a little bit more. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'll recognize maybe two questions, so we'll go with Commander Nash first.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome.
Thank you.
With the cuts being made at the federal level, are you worried about any of the grants that you're currently using?
Yeah, so I started providing weekly updates. We're tracking everything that's going on at the federal level. A couple of key things that we saw recently is the firing of about 5,000 health workers across the different departments, CDC, about 1270 EIS officers in their first year let go on Friday, and second year officers, some of them let go again also on Friday. We're tracking the measles outbreak in Texas, where last numbers are about 48 persons affected, all of them not vaccinated or no records of their vaccination. We spoke with the health officer there, who thinks there will eventually be 200 to 300 cases, again highlighting the importance of vaccines in preventing illnesses. So we're tracking those things. We'll see what happens. A lot of confusions. I've asked staff to proactively prepare all of our grants, looking at it. If we lose 100% of the funding, what are the potential impacts? If we lose 50%, what are the potential impacts? We don't know, but I can tell you a few things that we're used to having. We may no longer have them, so we have to adjust to those changes, but we are tracking and doing the best that we can to be prepared for that.
Thank you. Do keep us posted as you can.
We'll do.
Thank you. Did I see somebody else's hand raised, or? Okay, anybody else want to ask a question real quick? All right. Well, thank you again for coming. Really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to having you around and answering all of our health questions and participating in the community and in the committee too. So thank you. All right. We'll go ahead and move to our agenda. We've added Councilmember Harrell since I initially did roll call. So I have my proposed consent agenda.
Excuse me, Chair.
Oh,
Make sure that the camera's on. Okay, we're good.
yeah, it says that you are live, so that's,
Okay.
all right,
Thank
good
you.
deal. But I did forget one thing, which is public comment. We do not have anyone signed up for public comment today. All right. So I have a proposed consent agenda, which includes, absolutely. Would you mind pulling out some of the extra agendas and we can start passing them down? Everything up through item number 9, which is RS 2025-1054. Does anybody have anything they'd like to pull off of consent? Councilmember Benton.
5 and 6 for just a quick question.
Okay. All right, anything else that anyone would like to have come off? Oh, Councilmember Kimbrough.
3, please.
3, all right. All right. I'll go ahead and read these, and then we can revisit if anybody else has anything they'd like to pull. First item is RS 2025-1037, a resolution accepting the terms of a cooperative purchasing master agreement for urgent purchases for maintenance, repair, and operations, supplies, equipment, and related products for the Davidson County Sheriff's Office. Item number 2, RS 2025-1038, a resolution approving Amendment 2 to a grant from the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Office of Family Safety, to fund staffing positions to help manage the multidisciplinary needs of its clients. Item number 4, RS 2025-1040, a resolution accepting a donation of a trained police horse from the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee for the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department Mounted Patrol to use for law enforcement duties. And then item number 7, RS 2025-1044, a resolution approving Amendment 1 to a grant from the Tennessee Department of Health to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metropolitan Board of Health to ensure federal preparedness funds are directed to Tennessee regional and metropolitan emergency preparedness programs to prepare for, respond to, and recover from public health threats. Item number 8, a resolution approving Amendment 2 to a grant from the Tennessee Department of the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metropolitan Board of Health to improve the health of citizens of Davidson County by preventing and controlling the use of tobacco and tobacco products. Is there any of those items that need to come off? All right. Do I have a motion? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? All right. We recommend approval. And Councilmember Porterfield, you walked in at the end, so are you not voting?
You can vote. You can approve.
Okay, very good. That gives us 9 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. All right, let's go to item number 3, RS 2025-1039, a resolution accepting a high-intensity drug trafficking areas program, HIDTA grant from the United States Office of National Drug Control Policy and the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department to provide funding to aid in the investigation of drug-related deaths. Do I have a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. I know we had a question on this one. Councilmember Kimbrough.
I do. Okay. I do have a question. I was wondering, first, you all already do investigate drug-related deaths, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What kind of additional investigation would you do with the funding?
So we currently do this, and this is, I think, the 3rd year that we've received this particular grant, this HIDTA grant. And what it does is it allows us to fund the overtime to conduct the investigation so that you're not pulling an investigator away from their other duties and responsibilities. They do it in an overtime capacity. But what they try and do is when you have an overdose death, if we can determine who provided, if the substance that led to the death was unlawfully distributed, like say it was fentanyl or heroin or something like that, and they can determine who provided that controlled substance to the decedent, then they can work on a prosecution for a second-degree murder. And so that's how they utilize those funds.
But you would do that anyway, though, if you didn't have it, is that right? I'm just wondering. I thought maybe this was bringing in some kind of, so all this does is fund overtime, so whoever the detective or whoever's assigned to it can work overtime on that death?
It allows us to assign them to conduct the extra investigation they may need to investigate those deaths, yes. I mean, it's like, I have officers that are out here on patrol, but sometimes when I have, a drag racing event that occurs, or we have a holiday occurring and we have concerns around DUIs, and we run an overtime initiative because we're not pulling those officers away from their primary duties and resources. These are otherwise off-duty officers that could work this in an overtime capacity.
Okay, but detectives investigate deaths, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and detectives wouldn't be doing anything but detective work, is that right?
That's correct, but they aren't necessarily working on those cases at the time. I mean, they have other cases they have to investigate as well.
So it's like they can investigate the other cases and then come back later and do overtime and investigate?
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions, Councilmember
Yeah,
Prepty?
quick question, Chief Gilder, sort of related to this grant. Has MNPD seen the prevalence of tianeptine, also known as gas station heroin, in Nashville, Davidson County? Because I've been seeing some reporting nationwide about sort of the widespread prevalence of something that is similar in effect to heroin, but that can be accessed over the counter. Has Nashville seen any injury or overdose related to this specifically?
I'd have to check with our specialized investigations folks that track that kind of thing. I personally am not aware of it, haven't heard of it, but again, they're, folks that are assigned that handle those types of investigations. So let me check with them and I'll circle back and give it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, can we renew the motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting?
Abstain.
Okay, so that would give us 9 in favor, 0 against, 1 abstention. And just to correct my math, it was 10 originally, the consent agenda. It's actually 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting, not 9. I miscounted. All right, let's go to item number 5, RS 2025-1042. This is a resolution approving an ancillary provider agreement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through the Metropolitan Board of Health and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, Incorporated, to provide health care services to individuals eligible to receive covered services under a Blue Cross benefit plan. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. And Councilmember Benton, you had a question?
Yeah, that's just, this one, and technically 1043, but I guess we'll stick with the one we're on, 1042. So I'm assuming that this is just a required agreement that we have to approve so that we can do billing in case someone has Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance when they go visit one of our health department facilities. Is that?
Yes.
Mr. Sharp, do you
Am I
want to
on
speak?
track?
The difference in them is, one of these plans is their section of TennCare coverage, which we've been doing for many years.
And that's the
new one, and I
1043.
believe 42 is the commercial product.
Right, that's the way I read it.
Previously.
Okay.
And I would tell you that we collected about $45,000 from the TennCare section last year, which is almost 40% of all the reimbursements we got from TennCare patients.
Right.
And we don't know really yet what we'll get from the commercial product, but it's money in.
Sure.
If they're insured, let's let the insurance company.
Absolutely. Thank
All
you.
right, any other questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? All right, it's 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Item number 6, RS 2025-1043, a resolution approving an ancillary agreement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through the Metropolitan Board of Health and Volunteer State Health Plan Incorporated, DBA Blue Care Tennessee, to provide TennCare funding for covered services, provide the Metropolitan Public Health Department to eligible members in the Blue Care Tennessee network. All those in favor, do I have a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. So your question, Councilmember Benton, was on the previous? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? All right, thanks. 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. Okay. Let's go to item number 6. This is RS 2025-1054, a resolution requesting the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department to conduct an evaluation of the safety plans and measures for Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved and properly seconded.
Quick point of order.
Oh, yes, sir.
Number 9, just for.
Oh, what, I'm sorry, what did I say, 7?
You said 6.
Oh, okay, yes, it is number 9. Number 9, RS 2025-1054, it's on page 5, in case anyone's following along at home. So we have a motion, it's been properly seconded. I'm gonna move it, so that way we can recognize Councilmember Johnston for your description of your resolution.
Thank you. So 2 years ago, unfortunately, we had a school shooting at Covenant, and then we now, less than 2 years later, have had another school shooting in our public school system. And so this resolution asks MNPD, or the School Safety Division specifically that we created 2 years ago, to conduct a safety analysis to say, what do we need to be doing? What are your recommendations to making our buildings safer, our schools safer, our staff safer, from hardening of infrastructure, from training, ongoing training, what's the schedule of those types of things, what human resources, what technology, what is it in best case scenario that we should be doing to make sure that all of the people that go into our schools every day are safe. It doesn't compel anyone to do anything, it just gives us the information. I think one of the saddest things that I saw was when, after this shooting, that teachers and students said they were not surprised that this happened, and that should not be a feeling. That it's not surprising that something like that could happen in our schools or really anywhere. And so this to me is just information gathering, so that we can, number one, parents call me a lot and say, what should I be asking for? They don't know what they should even be asking for. They just know that their kid doesn't feel safe, that they don't feel safe bringing their kids to the schools. And this is not a Davidson County specific problem. This is an issue that we have obviously all over the country, unfortunately. And so my preference when handling things like this is always to be proactive versus reactive. Unfortunately, this is reactive, but better late than never, to say, what should we be doing? What's the conversation that we need to be having about things that we should be doing? What is that gonna cost? Like, how do we work that out among different departments and financing and all of that? So this just starts a very needed conversation.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnston. Any discussion from the committee? Councilmember Porterfield.
Thank you, Chair. If I could direct my question to Chief Gilder, we discussed this about 2 years ago, something similar, and if memory serves me correctly, and I apologize because I didn't have time to review the footage before the meeting today, but I remember us discussing that MNPD does something similarly already. Like, there's already a collaboration between like MNPD and schools as far as school safety. So can you speak to, what y'all are already doing, and do you believe that this is something that is necessary or what is helpful? And if I could get that response from both Chief Gilder as well as Mr. Braun from MNPS.
Yeah. So there is some state requirements to conduct some school threat analysis, and we work with schools on that already. I believe it's been a minute since I've read this particular, the elements in this, but I think this is a little bit broader than that. But we're more than happy to assist. We have a school safety division now, like Councilmember Johnston said, that is tasked specifically with, it contains our SROs and also our rapid school response team. And so they're in the schools day in and day out, and they can kind of, they have a real good feel for maybe where there may be some gaps. I think, again, I think it's a major safety issue. They're probably already proactively addressing that with schools, but, we're more than happy to sit down and collaborate and see where there is, an opportunity for improvement, so.
I concur with Chief Gilder. We already do annual assessments according to state law that we report up to the Department of Homeland Security. They provide about 80 factors or so that they don't publish, obviously, for security reasons, but we collaborate with the department on that. And again, we value that collaboration, are happy to continue to collaborate in any way we can. And of course, anything we report out, we'll work with the department and Metro Legal to make sure that from a safety point of view, we're disseminating information that we're allowed to. But yeah, I concur with Chief Gilbert.
All right, any other questions?
None for me. Are you recognizing council members not on the committee?
I will, but I'm going to take committee members first. Any other committee-related questions? Okay, I'm happy to recognize people outside. Councilmember Horton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson, for bringing this up. We're from a couple teachers in West who have concerns about safety, and I think this is, potentially a good way to try to get some action on these points. One of the questions I had, though, and I don't, necessarily have a solution for it, but it surrounds the wisdom potentially of the report that MNPS generates on, what improvements they made, and if they didn't make them, why they didn't make them. So I had a question perhaps for you or Chief Gilder or Mr. Braun potentially about, is there any risk in publishing a list of gaps in school safety, like of recommendations made but not implemented?
So that wouldn't necessarily be released.
Okay.
So what would be released is what the recommendations are, and there is a part that I wrote in there that school-specific things that you obviously would not want out would be redacted from the public, but I think it's important to have that information between MNPD and MNPS so that they can act on those things. But yes, anything sensitive, I'm very sensitive to that as well, which is why I wrote that in there, that would, very specific things would be redacted. And if there is a certain reason why, or schools that are not going to be doing anything, that would not necessarily be, we don't want people to know that, oh, XYZ school doesn't have ballistic film, or for example, right? So obviously we would treat that with common sense.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, Commander Nash.
I guess my question might be for one of our legal folks here. Can we redact that information under public? Yes. I'm good.
All right. How about any other questions? All right, Councilmember Porterfield.
I just have one more. I struggle with it a little bit. I'm probably going to end up abstaining, and I think I appreciate the sponsor for bringing this. I think one point of contention for me, and I know this is not something that we have the autonomy to control, but I feel like it does not really address the elephant in the room, which is unfettered access to guns, which we know that we're preempted and we don't have any control over it. But it is it's not addressing what the root cause is, which is in the state of Tennessee. People have unfettered access to guns. It's easier to get a gun than it is to register to vote, get a cosmetology license, or get a job here. So I would love to see something that kind of speaks to the root cause, and I understand that this didn't do that. So I'm going to abstain for now and sit with it between now and the meeting.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
So we have, our municipalities have absolutely no control over gun control, red flag laws, any of that stuff. Me putting that into what we can control would probably get it preempted, and that's not what I want. What I want to control and what I want to have influence over are the things that we do have control and influence over, and that is training. That is hardening our infrastructure. That is utilizing technology to secure our schools. That is having ongoing training so that the teachers don't have the reaction that they did at Antioch High School, because there is so much adrenaline. It was chaotic. Things did not work the way that I think they were intended to, and so we need to do a better job, and that's what this is about. It's about what we can control. I totally understand that there are things outside of this, that could possibly be improved. These are things that we have control over, so that's what I want to influence.
All right, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? All right, so we have recommend approval, 9 in favor, 0 against, 1 not voting. Thank you. All right, let's go to item number 10, BL 2025-690, an ordinance amending section 13.08.080 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws pertaining to the use of a community safety camera network. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. Councilmember Horton, let me recognize you to get a kind of description of your legislation, please.
Thank you, Chair. What this bill does is establish a legal framework, restrictions, and public oversight on the use of any community safety camera network. In practical terms, that's FUSIS or any similar program. Goal of the legislation is to address some of the sincere community concerns that we had around privacy, the purposes for what it could be used, whether there's accountability on how it could be used, while at the same time not impairing MNPD's intended use of the program for public safety purposes. It's been heard by this committee once before, and we deferred it for purposes of accommodating, I think, some very good amendments to be brought, which we have before us here today. So happy to talk more about the legislation itself or talk about the amendments. So that would the committee would like to proceed.
Okay, we'll go ahead and at least get, maybe if there's any discussion on the legislation prior to any amendments being applied. Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Councilmember Kimbrough,
And I guess it would be to you since.
as a
he's
sponsor?
responsible.
Sure, go ahead and ask him directly.
Right, I'm just trying to reconcile this because I really don't understand. How are we gonna have more oversight and at the same time not overstep? Like, what does that look like?
So we do it in a couple different ways on the oversight components of the legislation, and to take some of the key ones, we established a whole bunch of rules about how it can be used, where it can be used, for what purposes, who can use it, where they can access it from, and things like that. Then we say that anytime there's a violation of the rules, that the MNPD has to promptly notify both the Metro Council and the mayor's office. So we're getting real-time updates if there's any violation of the rules. At the same time, the MNPD is required to generate an annual report to the council detailing how many times cameras were used, for what purposes they were used, as well as for what the outcome of those incidents were. Finally, it requires that any contract for FUSIS include a termination clause where the council can terminate a contract during its life if it's being used in a way not intended by the council. And that can be informed in part by the violations we'll be notified by.
Now, who determines if there's a violation?
The MNPD would be required to notify us. They would identify if there's a wrongdoing not in compliance with the rules.
MNPD would notify us that MNPD violated?
That's correct. I think we have an amendment that talks about audit stuff, so they're not, auditing themselves. But once we get to the audit provision, happy to talk about that as well.
Okay. How about any other questions from the committee on the existing legislation? Okay, we can go ahead and start talking about amendments. Is anybody signing on to Councilmember Toombs's amendment?
I'll sign
on
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, let's go to Amendment 1 by Councilmember Toombs. So who wants to take lead? Well, first of all, can I get a motion on Amendment 1?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. So are you, either one of you?
I can do it.
Okay.
So essentially what Councilmember Toombs is asking is that we amend this to include on residential facilities only the prohibition that Metro Police cannot access the live feed. So she specifies the live feed in her amendment.
Okay. Any discussion about this one? Councilmember Benton?
I'm uncomfortable with this one. I think we already have a restriction as far as pointing directly at entryways, and I think we've covered that. The part that makes me uncomfortable is you've got private HOAs that are under their own private contracts with each other, the members, and this would take away their ability to make their own decisions as to how much they would like to regulate and allow their own invasion of privacy. for safety.
Let me recognize Director Darby, because
Yeah, this provision in Amendment 1 would apply only to access by the police department to live feed from donor cameras. It does not purport to restrict how private property owners can utilize their own security systems or video systems. It just means that the police would not be able to have access to them through the community safety network, camera network.
Chair.
So does it restrict what I'm concerned about? Could an HOA not,
An HOA would still be able to put up the cameras on wherever they might be able to put up their cameras, but it would preclude them participating in any sort of camera safety network, so that the police...
so if there was a call for service, it could not be used
If there
until
was,
after the fact?
if there were a system in place that allowed the police department to have live, to have access to live footage from those cameras, yes, this would preclude that.
okay. I know I saw a couple of hands, and I think y'all were trying to probably provide some clarification with Councilmember Benton, but let me find out, do you have any additional questions specific to that? Okay, did you, let me go to Councilmember Prepty. Did you have anything to add that was outside of, feels like she answered his question? Okay, how about Councilmember Huffman, okay?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, you guys are all good. Councilmember Horton.
Thank you, Chair. I think it might be useful also to consider this in the context of Amendment 2 by Vice Chair Huffman. They speak to two similar purposes, and Councilmember Huffman's is consistent with the spirit and addresses some of the concerns as well that Amendment number 1 raises.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, so can I bring in, I can't bring another amendment to the floor, can I? We need to make a decision on this one, or do I need to?
I think that you could discuss this amendment in context with other
Then we'll come
amendments,
back
but you would still want to vote separately on
Yeah,
it.
okay, let's do that. We'll go ahead and bring Councilmember, Amendment 2 by Councilmember Huffman. Do we have a motion on this one?
So moved.
All right, Councilmember Huffman.
Second.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thanks, everybody. Really just want to provide some clarity around this, because I think it helps answer your question. The reason that I drafted this particular amendment is in the instance of a multifamily facility, apartment complex, for example, that we respect the prohibition on residential use, but 2, that we also respect that an apartment complex is still a business, and they have a right to protect their property, such as a common area or a parking lot or a parking garage. The instance that I want to highlight would be if, let's say there's an assault on a volleyball court at an apartment complex. Then this would ensure that that footage can specifically be used to prosecute, if that comes up, to find somebody if that comes up. But more or less, it's to ensure that the apartment complex can protect what's theirs without overstepping those boundaries.
Okay, any discussion on this one? Councilmember Prepty. Councilmember Horton.
As long as there's no committee member that wishes to speak. I'm very supportive of Councilmember Huffman's amendment. I think it's consistent with both the spirit of the legislation itself and Amendment number 1. To talk about the different considerations in this very, very briefly. The first is to respect people's privacy in their homes, that we're not watching people coming and going from their homes. 2, I thought it was very important that we don't provide different levels of privacy to people depending if they live in a single-family home or two-family home or a multi-family home, but everyone benefits from the same protection. At the same time, on residential parcels, there are some parts of that parcel that are used for a non-residential function, like a parking garage or an alley or something like that. A lot of times those are very dangerous places. We had 2 homicides in my district last year, both of them in parking lots. So I think Councilmember Huffman's is a way to reconcile all 3 competing priorities in a way that both respects people's privacy, doesn't establish different standards depending on the type of housing that you're in, as well as covers these more dangerous areas like alleys or parking garages.
Okay, Councilmember Prepty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate both the sponsor and of the legislation and Councilmember Huffman for this amendment. What causes me just a little bit of concern with this amendment is that within multifamily residences, a common area can abut directly with the curtilage of somebody's unit where they have a reasonable expectation of privacy. Prime example is at the condo complex that I used to live at, our back patio abutted directly to an area where people would walk their dogs behind. And I still would have a reasonable expectation of privacy in that area, in that patio on that's connected to my unit. And so I want to make sure that we are intentional about not encroaching on those areas where folks can do and will have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And I see Councilmember Horton.
If you don't mind, I mean, jump in. Thank you, Councilmember Prepti. Strongly agree with everything you just said. I think it's very important that we don't infringe on areas where people have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And Director Darby, please chime in if I'm wrong, but elsewhere in the legislation, we already prohibit the access of a donor camera where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy. I do not believe that this amendment would in any way overrule that other provision, where if it's pointed at a non-residential function within that parcel and someone has a reasonable expectation of privacy there, that prohibition would still apply, and the donor camera would not be able to be accessed. Or do Councilman or Director Darby, if you would agree with that legal analysis?
I do. The Amendment 2 specifically addresses parking lot, parking garage, or other outdoor common area. But if the outdoor common area was something that was restricted by another section, another provision, like the front door of a residence, like if it called the front door of a residence, then it would be restricted.
Let me get Councilmember Porterfield.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to say this once so I don't have to say it every single time. Thank you to everyone that brought an amendment, as well as the sponsor. I know that everyone is doing their due diligence to try their best to solve a problem. So thank you all for your work on this. Councilmember Horton said something that just really sparked a thought for me. And I'm not an attorney, so I'm kind of scared to even stick my toe in this. But Councilmember Horton made a comment about people shouldn't be treated differently based on where they live. So if you're in a single family home versus a multifamily home, and I feel like this does do that to an extent if you're talking about parking structures, because in my home, my driveway is like my parking structure. So if I have a reasonable expectation of privacy in my driveway, but if I live in an apartment, I no longer have that reasonable expectation of privacy because my car is parked in a parking lot. So I understand the intent because parking lots are common areas, but I do think that in essence does treat people differently if they live in an apartment or if they live in a home. So that just raises a little bit of concern for me.
All right, thank you, Councilmember. Let me get Councilmember Huffman, and then we'll go to you, Councilmember Kimbrough.
I appreciate that concern. The reason that I specifically put in parking lots is just because of the sheer amount of break-ins that I incur in District 14, and I know a lot of y'all do. This is not an attempt to police anyone, it's to protect. It's as simple as that. And if you belong in if you live in an apartment complex, you live in Nashville, you should have the right to have your stuff protected. If you live in an apartment complex, a lot of times that's not by choice, right? So you're restricted in space. I definitely understand the concerns that you have, but it's simply just to make sure that they've got those extra protections on their personal belongings.
Thank you. Did you have a question also?
Oh, no. I just wanted to clarify.
All right, Councilmember Kimbrough.
Thank you. I was going to ask a question, but instead I'd rather make a comment so that it won't go on and on and on and on and on. I guess I'm somewhat bothered by this whole reasonable expectation of privacy because that's like a legal term that has been litigated for years. And ultimately, it's a court that decides whether or not there was a reasonable expectation of privacy. And by the time you get to the court, the violation has occurred. Or, if you violated somebody's rights or whatever. we as lay people can't just sit around and throw that term, oh, reasonable expectation of privacy, because it depends on what the court says, whether or not there was a reasonable expectation of privacy. So when we say this and talking about this phantom concept that we believe we can define, and Metro Council is going to enforce it, and the police are going to police themselves and all these beautiful, wonderful things, it's just unrealistic. For years, people can't tell us where and what a reasonable expectation of privacy is. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Councilmember Kimbrough. I appreciate your comment. Let me see if there's anybody that I have not recognized yet. No, let me go back to the sponsor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councilmember Kimbrough, for that. Reasonable expectation of privacy is a legal term, but the police are required to comply with it ahead of time. They can't just use it and then hope nobody catches them and take them to court for it. At the same time, I'm sensitive to the concern that this is a legal term, it's defined by common law, and it could be degraded over the coming years, potentially, depending on how courts go out. For that, the legislation also provides an alternative floor that a donor camera could only be accessed in what we define as a common area, which is a defined term. So basically, it provides an alternative floor where people can't put a camera in a doctor's office or in a bathroom or something like that. But there's an alternative floor there to try to control for the risk that a reasonable expectation of privacy's legal standard might be degraded in the coming years. So I'm sensitive to that concern, and the legislation has accounted for that with this alternative floor.
Okay, Councilmember Huffman, did you?
Yeah, just to respond to your inquiry, I've just got a question for our lawyer in the room here. As I see this as a reasonable expectation of privacy, as it is in the United States of America, that has been debated for a long time. And it's consistently been the fact that you don't have that reasonable expectation in public, which makes this legislation even more important. I feel that if you live in a home, you should have every right to be protected in that home from any type of oversight, surveillance, whatever it is. What this does is it simply defines the parameters around public space and specifically calls it out so that, in the event that there is some awful hypothetical situation down the road, that we have that to fall back on. And even if, once again, as Councilmember Horton pointed out, it gets to a really bad spot, hypothetically, we've got the right to pull the contract. That's the beauty of this. But I don't know if...
I think there's a question in there. But
well, the question is, my definition of reasonable expectation of privacy, I don't know if you agree with that or not.
I think that the amendment, as it's stated, doesn't, that this amendment doesn't reference reasonable expectation of privacy. It specifically says that if the camera is installed on a multifamily residential property and it focuses on areas other than these 3 areas, then it is not available for use as a donor camera by the police department for this particular, camera safety network, which I forget the full name of it. Community Safety Camera Network.
Let me recognize Deputy Chief Gilder.
So I would agree with the analysis that it's not the only definition there, but I would just say this, that the reasonable expectation of privacy, that term has been litigated extensively. There's a lot of case law on it. It is a term that police officers are very familiar with because every single day they're having to make decisions about whether or not there's a reasonable expectation of privacy and the Fourth Amendment applies. I mean, that is something that they are very familiar with. So while it may seem like, well, it's not defined in this ordinance, there's a lot of case law that explicitly defines what constitutes a reasonable expectation of privacy, and officers are very familiar with that.
Okay. Councilmember Nash.
Are 1 and 2 compatible with each other?
1 and 2 can both be applied. They are not. They don't directly conflict with one another.
Any other discussion on 1 or 2? We go ahead and vote. Yeah, separately on 1. Let's go with Amendment 1 by Councilmember Toombs. All those in favor of Amendment 1?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? 1, 2, I'm a 3. And then anyone not voting? All right. All right, so we recommend approval of that one, 7 in favor, 3 against, 0 not voting. Amendment 2 by Councilmember Huffman. All those in favor?
Aye.
And I'm sorry, that was, how many people said aye? All right, that's 6 in favor. How many are against? 2 against? 3 against? Okay, thank you. Anyone not voting? All right, and 1 not voting. 6 in favor, 3 against, 1 not voting. All right, let's go to amendment number 3 by Councilmember Gadd. Is anyone signed on to this one?
I have, in the alternative, having spoken with Gadd in a previous committee, well, for purposes of discussion, we can discuss both Amendment 3 and 4. But
Okay.
we had discussed, and she was comfortable with me moving Amendment number 4 in the alternative to Amendment 3.
Okay, well then let's go ahead and do we have a motion to move amendment 3 and 4?
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All right then, Councilmember Prepti, I'll recognize you for description of 3 and 4.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So with Amendment 3, essentially what Amendment 3, sponsored by Councilmember Gadd, does is it establishes an independent audit by the Metropolitan government at a regular interval. And so that's the main change within Amendment 4, is just establishing that independent audit. What Amendment 4 does is, in addition to establishing a mechanism for an independent audit authorized by either the mayor's office or by Metro Council, it also establishes sort of what that audit trail is required to include. So with the officer who accesses the donor camera, they are required in writing to provide a narrative as to the purpose behind why they were accessing it, the specific call of service, so the time, date, and circumstance of each instance of accessing a donor camera. And so it's sort of starting that, establishing that audit trail from the beginning, and providing it throughout the command structure so that it can be audited both internally at MNPD as well as externally through an independent audit. And the third thing that this does, it addresses the specific uses and types of technology, and specifically addressing lip reading technology or automated lip reading technology. In looking in drafting this specific provision, I looked at specific cases within constitutional law as it relates to the Fourth Amendment and people's reasonable expectation of privacy, specifically Katz v. U.S., which is a Supreme Court case that dealt with essentially similar technologies for folks who went to law school, the phone booth case. So essentially what this is seeking to address is, even if I am sitting in my car in a parking lot of an apartment complex, but I've got my phone to my ear, I've got a reasonable expectation of privacy in the conversation and the words that are being said. So making sure that we are sort of crossing our T's, dotting our I's, and looking at all eventualities to make sure that we're protecting folks' reasonable expectation of privacy. So that's the explanation of both amendments, and if there's anything that I'm forgetting, Director Darby, please correct me.
Okay, let me go to Councilmember Huffman, and we'll go to Councilmember Weiner.
So first off, I want to point out that in the next 3 years, I think we're all going to have law degrees because we're going to be forced to read council. So I just want to highlight that first. I expect that in 2027, sir. Second thing, I like this particular amendment instead of the Gadd amendment, just specifically because you don't rule out the fact that an independent firm can be applicable to this, but you're not requiring it. So it's a nice checks and balances. If there is an issue that comes up, we can address that when it comes up. So thank you for doing that. And my last thing, and it's a question for Deputy Chief Gilder. I'm very curious, do we have anybody that reads lips at MNPD?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Sounds like we need to. Just not in public parking lots, of course.
I can send my wife over there.
I will, point of information, the hearing impaired do read lips.
Oh, well, there you go.
just saying.
And Councilmember Weiner, did you have a question?
I do. And this is actually, I'd like to direct it to Deputy
Yes.
Chief Gilder. Could you just share with us, because I like this particular amendment, I just want to clarify, is this a duplication? Do we not already have this, or do we already have this within the police department's audit facilities and/or Metro internal audit?
So the policy that we created when we were having the FUSIS discussion around the actual contract with FUSIS did incorporate an audit provision with the captain. Upon reviewing this, it looks. It seems to me. I'm sorry with this. I don't know if it's this one or the next one. No, okay, yeah, so the actual ordinance itself contains, so much provisions to that. The only, concern I have here is the requirement to document in writing. A lot of that is automated. So, the audit trail that's created is electronic. So if the electronic records would suffice to document the purpose for the access. I would hope that would be sufficient rather than having to handwrite something. That may be what the intent was here. But yeah, the rest of it I think is consistent with what we already have.
Given that I think Councilmember Huffman would say that technology will take away our ability to write, those words may very well be interchangeable. Am I wrong?
The phrase written, like document in writing, electronic or handwritten notes would either suffice.
All right, how about any other,
Just a
Councilmember Benton?
clarification. Are we looking at number 4 to
Yes.
supersede 3 and 4?
Correct, yeah, so we, yeah.
I'm back.
All right, any other questions? So what is the, I guess, as far as voting is concerned, do we want to take a vote?
Yeah, I move approval of Amendment 4.
All right,
Second.
it's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor of Amendment 4, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
No, I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Anyone not voting? 2. Okay. So that's 8 in favor, 0 against, 2 not voting.
And do we need to move to withdraw 3, or just not?
We're just not going to move it? Or move it for a vote? Okay. Let's go to amendment number 5. Do we have a motion for amendment 5?
So moved.
Second.
No, it's been moved and properly seconded. Councilmember Prepty.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. What this amendment does is it provides for a requirement within, or it provides that within MNPD policy provisions, in line with their duty to intervene. If there's ever an instance, say, where they are tracking a perpetrator in hot pursuit, and they are on the live stream and there is an unfortunate incidence of excessive or unlawful force, that video has to immediately be captured and preserved and provided to the Office of Professional Accountability and the District Attorney General's office. The reason for bringing this amendment is not pointing the finger or saying that there's anything wrong within MNPD. It's simply stating that we have to have good, sound policies around our uses of technology, and specifically looking at instances that have happened here in the state of Tennessee where there have unfortunately been instances of the use of excessive and unlawful force that were captured on camera, which resulted in the death of an individual. For me, it is vitally important that we have those sound policies to where it is captured, preserved, and utilized in an appropriate fashion, because but for that video footage being captured, I don't think that case would have been successfully prosecuted.
All right, I'm going to go to Councilmember Weiner, then Councilmember Porterfield.
This is again going to be a question that I'll direct to Chief Gilder, Deputy Chief Gilder. I keep promoting you, and to Director Darby. So my biggest question here is, do we already have federal law that speaks to this, number 1, and number 2? Does this attempt to supersede it, or does it cause any issues? Is there any conflict there?
I'll let her take number 2, but yeah, so there is federal law and state law that requires us to intervene in cases of excessive force. All of our officers that from the rank of lieutenant and down are wearing body cameras. So if there were an incident that shouldn't just come up with Fusus or whatever the company is that we're utilizing, that also should be captured on a body-worn camera. Our existing departmental policy explicitly requires officers to intervene and both report in this type of instance. So I think we're bound by state and federal law to do this. We're also bound by our departmental policy to do this no matter the context in which it occurs.
The amendment, the way that it is written, doesn't require, actively looking through donor cameras, live feeds to see if they see anything. But if there is, call for service that leads the police to a donor camera and they see something on there that triggers their duty to intervene, then this would simply require that they capture that footage and retain it.
Okay.
All right. Councilmember Porterfield.
Thank you, Chair. And this one is probably to Director Darby, maybe. Is there anything with the state law that was passed that would prohibit us from also including that footage goes to the Community Review Board?
Yes, the footage, ostensibly the Community Review Board would get the notice that, OPA was undergoing an investigation, and then once that investigation is over, then they would have access to the results of that investigation. And I'm not sure if that includes the footage or not. It depends on whether that's a public record.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Nash, and I'll go to you.
I'm going to support this amendment. I think it's a good one. I think most policemen said, yeah, let's put on body cameras because I do the right thing all the time, and this will prove it. And I think we have found that that's probably true most of the time. And I also would like to say, if it's important to watch police officers, it's also important that we have cameras that watch the criminals. And that's what we're trying to do here. That is just great evidence. It's unbiased evidence. It doesn't mistake your identity or your identity. It's a picture of you. And we've got lots of instances past, it looks like me, but it isn't me. No, it's you. And so I think it's important that we support this, and we understand how important it is to law enforcement officers to have the ability to get proper photographic evidence.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Benton.
Section F, and I apologize, I don't know at the very bottom, subsection K.1C. I'm not sure what that's referring to, but not able to share from donor cameras with any individual group or entity. Entity to me could be with another police force in a cooperative search for someone. Is that?
If I may, that's language that's already in the ordinance. The underlying language is what's being amended.
Okay, I get you. So it's already there, not for discussion.
All right.
Sure.
How about any other questions on this one? All right, let's go ahead and vote on Amendment 5. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? Everybody's in favor? Okay. That's 10 in favor, 0 against, 0 not voting. All right, let's go to, so just to recap, Amendment 1, we are recommending approval. Amendment 2, we are also recommending approval. We took no action on Amendment 3. Amendments 4 and 5, we're also recommending approval. So let's go to, back to the bill as amended. All those in favor of BL 2025-690?
Discuss it as amended.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Let's take discussion. Any discussion? Councilmember Porterfield.
Surprise! I am going to be voting against it, and I just wanted to speak to why I was going to be voting against it. Again, I appreciate, I 100% believe that everyone is doing their due diligence to do the right thing. And when we first had this conversation around Fusus, I spent an extensive amount of time studying Fusus, being with MMPD, being down at that safety center, and I was a lot more comfortable with it at that point in time. I still voted against it in solidarity with the community concerns, but I was way more comfortable with it at that point in time. At this point in time, I do have a lot of concerns because we have entered into uncharted territory. And it's not that we are entering into it, we have entered into it, and we have civilians on a federal level having access to information that they've never had access to before, people's social security numbers and bank accounts, and very alarming things. And I trust that MMPD will do the right thing. So this is not a slight at MMPD whatsoever. I have full faith that they will do the right thing when it comes to FUSIS. My concern is that we have entered into uncharted territory, and I am afraid of how this technology could be used that could potentially harm the community. So I just wanted to state that. But again, I appreciate, because I believe that MMPD is operating in good faith, and I would not say that if I didn't believe it. I believe MMPD is operating in good faith. I believe that each one of these council members that brought this amendment is operating in good faith, and I believe that Councilmember Horton has really worked hard on this. So I want to thank you all for doing that. But that's why I have to vote no.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Nash, did you have a question?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. You were tugging on your tie, and I wasn't sure if that was
It wasn't.
Oh, okay.
It
All
wasn't,
right.
yeah.
Councilmember Horton.
I'm going to make one last-minute plea for Councilmember Porterfield's vote on this. That I completely agree with everything she just said. This is very, I think, volatile federal and state legal landscape, and it's a lot of the changes are very frightening and threatening, and I think we should do everything we can to protect people from them. I think that volatility is the reason that we need these guardrails that give us mandated termination clause if we don't want to approve the contract. We need to know exactly how it's being used, when it's being used, if there's any wrongdoing, and have that type of oversight and restrictions on it. And it's entirely consistent, I believe, to vote for these guardrails, and if your conscience requires it, still vote against FUSIS. So that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Huffman.
I'll leave my remarks for the floor, actually.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
We got snow tonight. Okay, any other comments? Okay, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, anyone not voting? All right, so we recommend approval. Let me recount though. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, thank you. Let me recount one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so that is 7 in favor, 2 against, 0 not voting, so we recommend approval. I know we're running out of, we're way past time, but, Mr. Clendenning brought the report for Office of Homeless Services. If you didn't get one, make sure you take one. We're 2 out of time to be able to talk more in depth about it. But if you have any questions, please email Mr. Clendenning and April Calvin if you have questions about what's in here. And I appreciate everybody being here. Could you pass that down to Mr. Benton?
Real quick, could I just make a
Yes,
point on this?
Councilmember Huffman.
Yeah, just really quick, I think it's important for everybody on the committee to know this. On the HPC, I have, for the past couple of months, been looking specifically at the number that you'll find on page 11, slide 22, the number of days that it takes to house a person. I've asked that OHS starts tracking that on a monthly basis, specifically because last month it was 142 days, this month it's 127 days. That's a good direction, but if there's a flow, it's always good to look at that and see like what y'all did different. So just wanted to point that out, as 127 days is more than a season than for someone that would request that the process of housing the time they would actually get housed. Anyway, that's all I have.
No, thank you for doing that. All right, since we're past time, we're going to go ahead and adjourn. Thank you.